Thanks for tuning into this episode of Walden Art, and today we're going to be doing another art review and critique. This one is for one of my patrons who submitted a THOR drawing for me. His name is Danny, and we're going to be doing, actually he penciled his own splash page of the THOR, and he also inked it. So I'm going to be doing an art review over his pencils and his inks, both things. So for those of you who landed on this channel, you don't know who I am, I want you to smash that subscribe button, hit the like, and share the video. And a little bit about me, you can learn more about me on my website. It's waldenwongart.com, where I do a lot of comic book work for Marvel Comics, DC Comics, and many other publishers out there. I'll do these art review and critique videos for some of my patrons who goes there, and then on my Patreon I have a lot of images where I can talk about tips of how to do work and industry secrets and things like that, and also post images of what I work on that I usually don't post anywhere else. And if you're interested in getting mentorship levels where I critique your work, such as this video here, check out my Patreon over there. Again, it's patreon.com/WaldenWongArt. And without further ado, we're gonna look at Danny's drawing of the THOR and also his inking as well. So here we go. Alright, so here is the image that Danny drew. He actually penciled this on his own, which is pretty good. He didn't have a scanner, he just used a camera and took a picture of it. But for those of you who don't have a scanner and who also have Photoshop, I'm also going to teach you how to like resize things just to make it better. So when you don't have a scanner and you only have a phone and you take a picture and you need to send it to the publisher, this is another way you can do it. But before we do that, we're going to look at the pencils. So I'm going to zoom in and look at his pencils. Here's his pencils right over here. Okay, a lot of buildings, which is pretty good. I like how this building is like right over here. It's like angled over. That's very creative. And here is the THOR. Okay, pretty good. Nice buildings in the background. I know drawing buildings is a lot of work, but at least you went in there and stayed with it and kept all the details in the right place. It looks like this was 2-point perspective. Okay, everything seems to be in the right place. So before we start, I'm going to show all of you how I would resize and make this a little bit better. So on Photoshop, I use my rectangle marquee tool, and I would just select the area like this. And then after selecting it, I'll click Control T, transform, or just go to image. Let's see, where's the transform? Adjustment. Actually, just to make it quicker, just on your keyboard, just click Control T. Control T, that's transform. Okay, let me reselect the area again. Reselect that image, and then Control T, transform. And then using your mouse, you're gonna right click, and then you're gonna click distort. When you click distort, you're gonna drag these corners until your page looks like a perfect rectangle shape. So I'm gonna drag this. Okay, so now it's more in the right shape. Okay, so if you don't have a scanner, you took it in an angle, this is one way to resize your page to make it look nice. Okay, so now you have that, which is nice. And then I'm just going to use my rectangle marquee over here. I'll reselect all of the area, and then I'll crop it. So I just go to image, crop. So now it looks like you just scanned it on the scanner. Okay, we're also going to do this with the inks just to get that out of the way, because everything kind of warps. Sometimes when you're taking a photo, you're not directly on top of it. You angle that photo, everything's going to be warped. So using the rectangle marquee tool, select the image right over here, and then Control T on your keyboard, Control and the letter T. This is the transform function on Photoshop. With your mouse, right click it and click distort. Once you have distort, drag these corners. You can drag those corners wherever. You drag it until that line on the page is straight, perfectly vertical as best as you can, like this. And then you're gonna drag the other side until it's perfectly vertical. You can also look at these blue lines to make sure that it's perfectly vertical and horizontal. If not, just drag them around like that. Okay, click enter. And then now you have that page perfectly there. And then I just use the marquee tool. I'll select the image right here. And then I'll go to image. And then I'll go to crop. When you go to image crop, it looks like you just scanned it on your scanner. So this looks pretty good. So the image stays consistent. So I'm going to take Danny's pencils and just put it directly underneath over here. So here's the pen. Actually, I'm just going to take the inks and put it directly on top. So So put this on top so we have both images. Let's see if both images fit. Okay, we're going to close that one because we don't need that one anymore. And then we're going to resize the image. Let me, on my Photoshop, I'm just going to look at my opacity. I'm going to reduce opacity to make sure the Thor matches what we have underneath. Okay, so that way we can toggle between the pencils and ink so I can see what I'm looking at. This is pretty close, so that's good enough. Okay, I'm going to increase this. So before we look at the inks, we're going to look at the pencils. Okay, cancel here. Here's the pencils. And we're gonna take a look. So the face is drawn nicely. Everyone draws a little bit different. So I don't know about the spike on top of the Thor's head. Usually it's directly on the top, not like in front, not like a unicorn. So this image I would actually redraw. And then kind of move it like up over there. That would be a better place. So instead of just moving it in Photoshop, I'm just gonna use the pencil and mark this area. So I want to draw this here. I would actually have that up over here, directly on top. Okay, and let's take a look at some of the other areas. Okay, right away I noticed that the Thor's hand. Okay, here's his hand, here's his fingers, and then here's the palm of the hand, like right over here. It's gripping something. That the handle of the hammer should be inside here. Right now the hammer looks kind of like this. So what I'm gonna do is mark that area. So some of this stuff in here, it should be going inside the finger. Okay, I'll make that finger a little bit longer and make these a little bit larger. Okay, and then right over here we're going to look at the rest of the image. So I know the hammer, the Thor's hammer, it's not just a block. So we have that rectangle shape over here. On the side of the Thor hammer, we also have this shape going on, the more near. We have this shape, this shape, this shape, and then this shape going on, and then the side of it should be something like this. Okay, so this is how this looks. So that's how the Thor's hammer is supposed to look with penciling. We're going to take a look at some of the other details. Nice. I like how you drew all this. This is really nicely penciled. I know some of this takes time, but this looks pretty good. Okay. You see, we'll look at the finger here. So when we're working on comics, sometimes I know that it's off the panel, but for the original art, sometimes I also like to just draw off the panel. Just for, you know, the collector who collects later, you can also see the finger over there. So here's this finger, here's this one, and just keep everything in the right place. Let me look at the anatomy. Anatomy is okay. The waist is a little bit smaller than what I'm used to seeing, and the legs are a little bit thicker. So I would actually go in here and make this waist just a little bit longer. So right now I'm just critiquing the pencil part of it, not the inking part of it. We'll come back to the inking a little bit later. The disc here is a little bit off. This shape looks pretty good, but this one's a little bit off. I would actually redraw this one a little bit bigger here. I also will use templates just to make sure these are like nice and ovals if you have templates. Okay, all the detail, I like that you're very patient and you draw in all the details. Some of the metal part of the legs, I like how you added these extra lines over here to make it look like there's a sheen going on. So that's pretty good. You even added some hatching over here. So that's a nice way of drawing it too. Okay, so here is a Thor. I would actually draw Thor much bigger because it's a splash page, it's a half splash page. If you drew Thor much bigger, you won't have to draw that much in the background. So I'm just gonna take what we have over here and just kind of make it a little bit larger so you see what I mean. So you can actually fit Thor here, and you can fit him more into the page, flying up into the air. So you don't waste that much space, that much time drawing some of the backgrounds. So I would draw something like that just to fit Thor in there, and then draw this building, and then it'll be more of it in your face. So let's look at it before. So before the Thor is like this, which isn't that bad, but actually when I draw stuff, I like the characters to be a little bit larger, unless there's a reason for you to show more of the buildings in the background. And then now I just enlarge it a little bit more just to show more of the Thor. Okay, let's look at the bottom panel. The bottom panel, I don't really know who this character is. Doesn't matter who this character is. We'll just look at the anatomy. Okay, anatomy is pretty good. Right here, I would actually move this part a little bit higher. So I would take the eraser and not leave that part white, just to keep it consistent. It looks like he's breaking out The hands are okay. Some of the knuckles, I would actually draw joints kind of like going this direction. So here's the finger, then here's one finger, here's the joints, kind of like that. So you have those 3 cylinders. Right now I only see 1 cylinder, 2 cylinder, 1 cylinder, 2 cylinder. When you look at people's fingers, there's actually 3 cylinders. So for example, here's the character's hand. You have 1 cylinder, 2 cylinder, 3 cylinders. Okay, so when I'm drawing these fingers here, I would actually have, here's the knuckles, we have 1 cylinder, 2 cylinders, and then 3rd cylinder for the finger. So we have 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's take a look at the other finger. Yeah, so these fingers, which is drawn nicely, there's like 3 cylinders, just it's sectioned off nicely. So that's pretty good. Okay, a lot of good work over here. So that's the pencils, pretty good. Other than just those few things that I critique, I would actually make this fist a little bit bigger, fist and the hammer a little bit bigger. Okay, just because the forearm over here is that large that the fist kind of looks a little bit too small. I'm gonna take this and kind of enlarge this hand a little bit so you can see how it looks. So I'm gonna take that and then enlarge this hand just slightly. I'm just gonna angle it so it doesn't hit his head that much. So the size of that looks a little bit better, okay, for foreshortening, because objects that are closer to you are a little bit larger than objects further back. So the fist here should be a little bit larger. Okay, and the hand here is kind of drawn straight. You can actually go in here. I mean, you already inked it already, so we can't really do it. But in the future, if you draw something and you want to show more things that are leading towards you in the foreground, closer to you, instead of drawing this arch over here like so straight, kind of arch this a little bit more rounded this way. Okay, when you arch these a little bit more rounded, it will look like the arm is going closer towards you. So I'm gonna redraw that first arm. Okay, so I'm gonna erase all this so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so we have the original arm. Here's the fist, and you have these. Here's the thumb, and then here's these the bracelets over here. Here's the thumb, and then here's the bracelets over here. Okay, so right now it looks like it's straight up. But if you drew these curves on the bottom, like here, we'll draw the thumb again and we draw the fist. Okay, now we're gonna curve these much more. So when you curve these much more, it looks like it's going towards you. Okay, the angle of it looks like it's kind of like leaning forward towards you. Okay, so the arch of it is important when you're drawing things like this. So we want this hand to arch out. If this hand was straight, you can just have this straight. But if it's kind of like bent a little bit, you want that to arch, and then maybe add some shadows on this side. Okay, the face here. The face looks pretty good. There's nothing wrong with it. Good job on the mouth. Good job on the nose. I like the way the nose is drawn. I think the eyes can be a little bit closer together. So I'm going to take that eye, and I'm also going to take that eyebrow too. I'm just going to smooth it slightly closer. Let's take a look and see how that looks. Yeah, so see that? I'm going to go in there and just get rid of some of the that gray area. I'm going to sample this area so we can see it. Okay, sample this area, cover up some of that. There. So when I move the eye a little bit closer, it looks a little bit better. So let's take a look at it before. So before the eye is like all the way out there. It doesn't look that bad, but I think if the eye was a little bit more closer, it would be better. Now let me tell you the rule of drawing the eye. When you're drawing a regular human face, here's the human face. Okay, here's the center, here's the eye. The distance between two eyes is one eye. So however wide this eye is, the distance between those two eyes is equivalent to this one eye. So if I took this eye over here and moved it in the center, that's like the distance between two eyes is one eye. So if I imagine the width of the all the way across, you have 5 eyes all the way across. So when I look at this eye, we have the length of this eye here. See this eye? Okay, if I move this over here, that's the distance between two eyes. Well, actually, it's kind of curved over here. So originally, you had it a little bit too far, so we just moved it in closer. Anytime you draw eyes, I always draw eyes a little bit darker on the top eyelid. So this eyelid here, I would just pencil this in a little bit thicker, mostly because eyes, it casts the shadow. The sun casts a shadow underneath the eyelid. Okay, good job on the mouth and the face. Okay. I would actually draw some of the building in the background. So here's some of the buildings here, and here's the background. So it will help separate this the feathering over there. Okay, good. So far, so good. Okay, now we're going to take a look at the inks. Good job, Danny. I'm going to take a look at inks, and I'm going to critique the inks now. Aside from those areas I talked about, because you inked it the way you penciled it, we're not going to talk about those areas that, like, for example, the fist, the hand not holding the sword back over here. I'm just going to circle this in, and then, oh, you remove the spike over here. Or let's, yeah, so originally there was a spike, and when you started inking, last minute you removed the spike. Okay, that's good, and you did some changes. So good, Danny. So when you penciled the artwork after you were done penciling, you decided to go back in there and do some more adjustments. So I know THOR's helmet, it's not just like rounded, so you still need to draw that dome thing, like right over here. Okay, so draw that little dome thing right there. So I'm going to draw that dome thing, and then I'm just going to erase this part. Okay. And then there goes the helmet, that part of the helmet. Okay, now let's look at your inking technique. Okay, so I'm looking here and I'm trying to determine what tools you use. It looks like you're inking with either quill or a micron. Let me see if there's any brushwork. Okay, you also use gel paint, which is pretty good. Okay, so it looks like there is some kind of brushwork for the thicker lines. Okay. So this is what we'll do here. We're gonna critique some of the work. Okay, so some of the hatch lines, this area is spaced nicely. It's always good when things are spaced nicely, evenly apart from one another. These lines over here, you have this line which is like out here, all of a sudden this one goes in, this one jumps in. It's not consistent. When you're doing these taper lines, you want those lines to kind of end and start in the same place. So I'm just going to flatten this image first. Let me go back. We don't need to look at the pencils anymore. Layer. Let me see if I can flatten. Let me just turn this off. Okay. Let me take a look at this. Okay, white. I'm just going to erase this. Keep that flat. Let me create another piece of paper. First new, we're just gonna call this white paper, so we don't see that checkerboard pattern. We're gonna move it all the way to the bottom, and then I'm just gonna fill this with white. Fill it with white. No, not black. White. There. Okay, good. Actually, instead of filling with white, I'm just gonna sample the same color over here. Sample that same gray, and then just fill it with that color. Okay. Now I'm gonna lock this. Go back to the inking. Here's the inking, and then we're going to continue critiquing. Okay, so here, some of these taper lines, make sure you follow the flow of it. When I say follow the flow, you see how these lines are pointing this direction? What I want you to do is make sure these are kind of pointing in the same direction. So right here, just flow over here, flow nicely. So right now you have it pointing downwards. Let me get the red color. So here's the red, so you can see what the areas that I'm marking up. So keep this parallel to each other. Now, when you're closing up these taper lines, I'm going to zoom in so you can see. These taper lines, some of them ends here, this one ends here, this one's here, here, and this one's here. You want to be consistent with your the negative space. So each of these triangles, you want them to close in the same area. So I'm going to go here and then close this up in the same area. You also want the tips of these to also start up in the same area. Okay, so like for example, I'm going to look at some of the other areas that is off. So right over here, let me zoom in. So this one's a little bit too long. We're going to make that a little bit shorter. You see how this one is like starting here, this one goes in here, this one comes back out and goes back in. It's better to have everything kind of consistent like that. So it's gradual. You see that? Okay, nice hatch work on the forehead. These are spaced nicely. That's very good. I'm going to circle that and say that's very good. The hatching is pretty good here. It looks like it's micron work. Okay, so some of these, it could be quill work. I see some bleeding over here too. So again, space these evenly, space them apart evenly. Very important that they're spaced apart evenly. Okay, some of these hatch lines, so even the cross hatch line over here is pretty good. The cross hatch line over here looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm gonna take a look at some of these other area. Let's see. Okay, yeah, the spacing, Danny, for the most part, when you're doing the spacing, it does look pretty good. What I want you to do is focus on tapering the lines. Tapering lines, when you're drawing a line, you're going in there and you're closing it up a little bit better. Like a line like this. You're drawing a line, you're closing it up, you're closing it up, closing it up. A lot of inkers, they have a hard time doing this. So this is something that you can do with one stroke, like what I'm doing here. Just press down harder. Or you can go in there and press down and then go and add another line, go in here, draw another line, and just fill it in. Okay, now with inking, we do want the buildings to have some depth. Like the door looks great, the outline of the door. Even the flowing cape is pretty good. Does a little bit of bumpiness. I would just go in there and go in here and just kind of smoothen it out so we won't have any having any of that bump. Yeah, it looks like you're using a micron. So from here, you see this line? It's a dead line. It's like super flat. There's no line ways to them. This one is a fold that folds over. I would actually make this line thicker. The reason I would make this line thicker is because you have this line that's so thick and this line is in front. This line here needs to be thicker. Any line that's in front overlapping another line in the back needs to be thicker. Okay, there we go. I would make that line a little bit thicker. Okay, just to move that in the foreground. Same thing with this. The front of this this part over here, I would make this part a little bit thicker, right over there. Okay. Also the buildings. Good job on drawing all the buildings. Windows are all in the right place. Right over here, I would make the lines out here a little bit thicker. Again, when you're inking buildings that are closer to the front, closer to you as the viewer, it's going to have a thicker outline. So I'm going to go in here and make, say I make this thicker, and then this one that's closer to the viewer, I would make that even thicker just to push this out in the foreground. So this one, like, I'm exaggerating the thickness here. This one, the outline thicker, and then back here, this outline will be thinner. Okay, and then back here, these ones will be a little bit thinner. Okay, and as you go further back, the higher you go, the thinner those lines are. But we still should focus on some of the areas to have a little bit of a thicker line right over here. Okay, to help separate the building. We're gonna look at the bottom panel. Okay, good job. Actually, I want to like compliment you on how you use how Danny actually inked all of this here and then inked these lines, and then he went back in there and used a white ink to go around that. That's exactly how I would do it also. Sometimes when you're using a gel pen and you're marking it once, it looks like you can see a little bit of grays. Just, you can always go in there and just wait for dry. Once it dry completely, go back in there and use the gel pen and mark, go back on top and just draw it. And instead of drawing on top like really hard, just kind of like dabble in it, like stipple it, and then the more of the white will come out a little bit better, like that. See? So I would just go in there and just add more white gel paint. And if you're doing this on the computer, just do what I'm doing like right now. I would just go in there, use the eraser and just erase around it, erase around it, erase around it. Sometimes I'll do comic book published work, and then I'll be inking something, and I'll forget to erase these lines, and then I already scanned it. Instead of like re-inking it and re-scanning it, I'm gonna go in there and kind of just touch it up in Photoshop. See, these are blunts over here. See these blunts? I would actually go in there and make them a little bit sharper. You can go in there with a brush and try to make them sharper, or you can just go in there and use the gel pen and just kind of like flick it a little bit. If you flick it a little bit, you're gonna get a little bit sharper feel. But what you've done here, very nicely done. That's exactly what I would do too. I would go in there and ink back on top. So all this is really nicely done. Okay, so these buildings, these bricks here, they're rounded bricks. I would actually use like, when I'm making bricks like this, I actually go and use a repeatograph size 8 pen, 0.08, and I would ink in the line. When I ink in the line, it just automatically gives you that rectangle feel. So it doesn't look that much of a oval feel here. Okay, and I would also draw grid lines, and then draw a line in between each one, and then just fill in this one, and then fill in this one, and then fill in that one. Okay, now this here, okay, again, so the taper lines, I would actually go back in there and just close them off a little bit, right over here, close them off. So it's like a little bit of a triangle thing over here. So for example, I'm going to go here, make that little bit of a triangle like this, and make that kind of like more of a sharper feel. Same with all these. So for Danny, I want you to work on tapering lines. So this area is tapered nicely. See that? That one's tapered nicely. I don't know if that's by accident or you actually went in there and tapered it, because they have these triangular tips. Okay, but these ones, these are blunts. We don't want blunts. Sometimes artists that are inking and then they don't have the skill to taper lines, what they'll do is they'll ink that line like this and they'll add a double line just to give it more of a gray value. So what I mean is they'll just go in here, they'll ink this line exactly the way you did it, and then they'll go in there and add a double line. When they add the double line, it gives it more of a gray value. Okay, so these things back here, okay, I'm going to demonstrate how I go about inking this texture. So with a quill or with a brush or with a micron. So right now, what you've done was you went in there and you use black ink, and then you just made a little big black blob, or maybe you did all this cross hatching first, and after the cross hatching, you added that blob in there. I can see the blob. It doesn't look like it's like gradually fading in. So I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna use black, and I'm gonna demonstrate how I would do this. Let me get a big area. I'm gonna erase, actually, let me erase one of these. Let me erase one of these and demonstrate and go in there and ink one of these for you. So I have my brush, and then when I'm inking with a brush or quill, or like right now I'm doing digital, I'll start very thin and I'll go really thick. And what I'm doing is I'm going up and down. Okay, I'm going up and down. Okay, let me make my brush, get the brush a little bigger, going up and down, and I'm splotching it. Okay, and I'll keep doing that all the way across. And I'll try to keep things parallel to each other. So I'll start very thin, and I'll go really thick, and I'll go really thin. Okay, this is how I do it. This part of the background takes time. A lot of people, when they're reading comics or looking at artwork, they don't really notice what's happening in the background. But as an artist and an inker who does this for a living, I notice people's work. After you hatch the line doing that blooping texture, I would actually go over here, start thicker and go thin, like this. Start thicker and go thin, like this. And I would just cross hatch all the way across, like this. Okay, same, start thin, go thicker, and you're doing these bloop lines. Start thin, go thicker. Or sometimes if you're used to going left to right, just rotate your canvas and then go start thin and go thicker, start thin and go thicker, and then so forth. And then you want that to fade. I'm going here and do the same for this all the way across. Regardless if you're using a brush, a crow quill, or a micron. Sometimes the micron is a little bit harder because it's not as flexible. You just go back in there and add more. Or if you're doing this digitally, like what I'm doing right now, you just press down harder to get that thicker line. So now I'm going to rotate it back to how it was. We're going to zoom back. See, that looks a little bit more natural. And if I wanted the center of that crosshatch effect more darker, I would go back in there with a brush. Actually, I would go back in there with a repeatograph pen, a techno pen, and I would start stippling. Okay, let me go in here. I would start stippling dots randomly, like this. Okay, so I don't cover up all those areas. Okay, this gives me that gradual fade effect. Like what I'm doing, I'm just a little stipple, some dots bigger, some dots smaller. I don't cover up everything like that. And then sometimes if I do cover up everything, I just go back with a white gel pen and then I kind of soften up. And then I'll zoom back out to look at it. See that effect over here? So now if I think that it's too much white, I'll go in there and I'll use white ink, the white gel pen, like the same white gel pen that you use to work on this area. I'll just use the white gel pen, go back on top, and just slowly stipple in some white areas on top of that. So it helps break up that tone like that. So now when I look in here, you see the difference between, let me use this red circle to circle it. See the difference, let me use the red. Where's the red? Here's the red. Okay. See the difference between this effect and these effect over here? Okay, and now I'm gonna take that effect and just place it in the feel of the same area so you can get a feel of how that will look. So Control C, Control V, bring that over here. Okay, bring that over here. Okay, Controls. Actually, I need to flatten the image first. Layer, flatten image. Okay, there we go. So now we can see, because at first I was doing a transparent layer. So we'll take that image again. Control J. Move this over here, Control J, jumping the image out, and then moving this over here. Okay, now layer, flatten image. Okay. Now you see that effect just looks more pleasing. It looks a little bit nicer. Okay, so that's an effect that you can practice on, Danny. Okay, now some of the buildings here, you have this building ledge looks like it's in the foreground. So because it's in the foreground, I would go in there and I would make this a little bit thicker, just so you have more depth into your artwork. This is how I would do some of the background texture. Okay, right over here. So I would add that texture. So when I zoom back, you'll see how that looks like compared to the rest of it. So that texture was, the way I did that was, I'm going to show you again. So I'm going to go in here, very thin, and then thick lines here. Thin, and then thick lines, thin, and then thick lines. And then once you have one direction, you go the opposite direction. You're going to crosshatch that to get that texture. Okay, and then you go back and you kind of stipple some other things in. That's how I create this texture here. This texture looks a little bit better than some of it if it's just a back blob over there. So there you have it. That's Danny's art review critique for this video. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. You can check out my work over on waldenwong.com. Look at some of the work that I've done from Marvel and DC Comics. And if you're interested in doing my Patreon, where I do art review of your work, you can check out my Patreon. You can also look at different tiers if you want to just do homework assignments, practice thinking, or look at tips that I will post up only exclusively over on my Patreon. So check it out. It's patreon.com/waldenwongart. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, please like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.